has been a long, painful war with the Decepticons. Whatever lies beyond that portal is our best and last hope, my friend.
Transformers, a show created in the early 80s about futuristic transforming robots in disguise.
Man, this is so funny.
It was a great show. The protagonists such as the Autobots, who were trying to stop the evil forces of the Decepticons, people were intrigued. Kids were anyway. The show was created for the sole purpose of selling toys to little kids, whilst adding little bits of lore here and there to keep the audience interested. Transformers was so big at one point that they even had a fully animated movie. And no, I'm not talking about the worthless piece of shit that's Michael Bay's fucking piece of...
Man, this is so funny. Man, this is so funny. Man, this is so funny.
To say the least, Michael Bay's Transformers left a terrible taste in most people's mouths, and at this point in time Transformers as a whole are looked at as a terrible franchise. However, that's incredibly incorrect. The modern-day Transformers franchise has had its little blips in franchise history, like Transformers Prime, one of the best shows since the original Transformers, and the toys are still alright, albeit very, very uncreative. But there's one tinier, almost insignificant looking blip in the franchise's history that surprisingly outdoes them all. Yep, you saw the title. Transformers: Fall of Cybertron. Transformers: Fall of Cybertron is a sequel to the critically acclaimed game Transformers: War for Cybertron by High Moon Games. Transformers: Fall of Cybertron presents itself as a standalone game which doesn't require you to have played the prequel, therefore I'm not going to go into the prequel in this review. But leave a comment if I should review War for Cybertron next. Transformers: Fall of Cybertron begins with Bumblebee being hurt by an incoming tentacle thing, for all intents and purposes, from Megatron's warship. Ratchet comes over to get Bumblebee up to fight up the now boarding Decepticons, and this is when it lets you calibrate the controls. The control calibration works itself into the gameplay as seen here.
Base energon levels are almost normal. Overshields are charging up. I need to test your retinal scanners. Follow the light. That's it.
It should be noted that at some points during the game, it begins to feel like a Telltale game. You're not even 2 minutes in and already the game's filled with scripted events, dialogue, and story details. The difference is it also retains the stance as a third-person shooter while doing this. Continuing forward, Bumblebee eventually gets to Optimus Prime after being told by Ratchet that he needed help, and ends up taking a bullet for him. After that level, it proceeds to go on to the scenes prior and leading up to the events of the final level. In a nutshell, the story of this game is a linear progression path that leads you to the final fight with Megatron, whilst letting you place other Autobots and Decepticons along the way. On top of that, you can choose Megatron or Optimus to play as in the final battle. In my personal opinion, the story crafted for this game is one of the best I've ever seen. It's not every day a game about robots can emotionally move someone. The amount of references to Transformers Generation 1, articulation of the story, character development, plot development is very refreshing. Unfortunately, that's where the game starts to fall short as a game. Despite the fact that I previously said I would not bring up War for Cybertron, it does have to be mentioned to convey some of the issues with this game. What I can say for a fact is that game had a lot more articulation combat-wise and just overall as a game. In contrast, Fall of Cybertron is more of a story-based game, with story coming first and gameplay coming second, unlike its predecessor. However, Fall of Cybertron does attempt to make up for the lack of gameplay, with subtle Easter eggs to the original series, most notably Starscream's crown. But War for Cybertron's gameplay articulation starts to outweigh Fall of Cybertron. For example, per se you're Megatron and you're walking down a hallway with a bunch of Autobot prisoners. As Megatron, you can kill the prisoners or scare them. In contrast, in Transformers: Fall of Cybertron, there's nothing like that. But Fall of Cybertron's story is its saving grace. Transformers: Fall of Cybertron's focus seems to be a bit more based on immersion and story rather than combat. Now don't get me wrong, there's very obviously still combat in the game. However, Fall of Cybertron doesn't attempt to fix any of the bugs with War for Cybertron's combat. It almost feels like a direct rip, minus things such as killing prisoners as Megatron. In terms of attacks, there aren't many guns or melee weapons that you feel explicitly compelled to use throughout the game. The firearms in this game are not that great, so I'm only going to bring them up briefly. Yes, the Megatron-looking scope pistol that makes noises that sound like the original Generation 1 cartoon firing noise is unique, but that's about the only unique gun in the game. All I ended up needing to beat the game was the slingshot weapon and the upgrade for Teletran 1 that refills ammo every time you go to him, and from that point on, you're pretty much overpowered. Most of the other guns are standard and are cool for about 10 minutes. This game relies a lot on its story, which really does mask the repetitive gameplay style they went for. Don't get me wrong, I personally love repetitive and farming games. Maybe it's not your thing, but I think Warframe is one of the best games out there. But Transformers Fall of Cybertron really lacks long-term playability. Most of the levels are the same thing, consisting of shooting the enemy, get some coins from them, shoot another enemy, get some coins, shoot the boss, you get the point. Now, are there some creative non-cookie cutter missions? Absolutely. For instance, there's a Grimlock mission, or missions depending on how you look at it, that was really fun my first time through the game. Come to think of it, the Starscream mission was pretty fun. You got to fly around a kind of open world type area, you could destroy a lot of stuff, and there was the previously mentioned Starscream's Crown Easter egg. But every level of this game, compared to just the first 5 to 6 levels I played of War for Cybertron, it just doesn't hold up that well. In one of the first levels of War for Cybertron, you were already flying. And I know that doesn't sound like much, but Starscream's level in Transformers Fall of Cybertron takes forever to get to. Also, the first game does a better job of building a sense of speed for vehicle modes, for both cars and jets. Like, isn't there something about this that just seems slow? War for Cybertron tries more or less to own the repetitive gameplay style by implementing extremely good level design. Again, this is something that Transformers Fall of Cybertron does do at some point throughout the game, but not very often. The biggest instance of this is when Sideswipe finds the Space Observatory. But when you're in the observatory, you can't run or shoot, which kind of defeats the purpose of gameplay. Yes, that isn't repetitive, that only happens once in the game practically, but it's not fun. Maybe it's just me, but there's something about War for Cybertron's level design that felt more intriguing, more interesting. It was something that Transformers Fall of Cybertron just couldn't seem to capture. But again, I haven't played all of War for Cybertron, so who knows if I'm dead wrong. Level design and annoyance level are two big factors in the game's replayability, and in my opinion, War for Cybertron holds up better in that regard. It's hard to replay a story-based game when you already know how it ends. Transformers Fall of Cybertron tries, but really falls flat in its face. None of its level design is that interesting, and more or less claustrophobic, and is really boring. As with anything, there are outliers to that, but don't expect anything mind-blowing from Fall of Cybertron's level design. Straying away from comparisons for a bit, let's get back to the story. One thing I will always credit Transformers Fall of Cybertron with is that every level I can think of, and I've played the game 3 times now, has a purpose in the plot. One level was about the Autobots couldn't escape with their fuel, so Megatron sent out, I think it was the Insecticons, to blow up the bridge that the tanker needed to cross. Now if I remember correctly, the tanker somehow took flight and flew away. I'll add a caption on screen now in post if I was right. And yes, that does defeat the purpose of the whole level, but it doesn't seem to tarnish the story. It's hard to describe why. Maybe it's because of how abysmal and distracting this particular level is. Going back to gameplay, this is probably one of the most tedious missions in the entire game. The main annoyance of this level is that you have to chase after a giant tanker and destroy 4 axles on 4 separate wheels. This level is particularly annoying on hard mode because the enemies don't seem to die and are infinitely respawning. This level might have sounded good on paper, but in play it's just really annoying. Seriously, whose idea was it at the development studio to make a level where you do the same thing 4 times while infinitely respawning enemies that don't seem to die, chase you down and kill you? But I guess that level represents the difficulty of the game. This game is hard, and even on easy, it's still really hard. It should be an expectation to die at least once in every level on anything higher than the easy difficulty. I managed to beat the game in easy and hard mode, but my friend Zaire, who recorded some of the footage with me, couldn't even get past the stages he tried on medium difficulty and had to drop it back to easy. So if you rage easily, this game probably isn't your thing. But let me just say, beating this game on hard mode is one of the most satisfying things. You finally did it. You completed one of the hardest games in the world in my opinion, and even though there's no physical reward, you still feel satisfied. There's no way to describe the feeling this game gives you when completed. Even on easy mode, it's just so satisfying. That doesn't mean the story's conclusion is, however. The game ends with a cliffhanger of whether our heroes and villains are even alive. It shows Optimus and Megatron being sucked into a space bridge to Earth, along with everyone else, which is followed by the space bridge closing and Optimus saying,
"Till all are one."
This is a big reference to the Generation 1 cartoon, because it was Optimus' catchphrase, or was it something he said once in the 1967 movie? It was related to G1 somehow. Hey Rodimus Primal, can you help me out?
The actual phrase, till all are one, actually was a catchphrase added in for, obviously, when, spoiler alert, if you've never seen the 1986 movie, when Optimus Prime dies and he passes on the Matrix onto Ultra Magnus. Rodimus Prime also says it at the end of the movie, and everybody starts chanting it till all are one. It's kind of a reference to the actual Transformers afterlife. You know, if all sparks become one, or till all are one. It kind of almost sounds like Highlander, so to speak. If you guys ever seen that, there can be only one. But in reality, it more so links to the fact that Primus, who is the creator god of all Transformers, is the source of all Transformers' life. So that's really what Till All Are One is about.
Alright, thanks for clearing that up. Speaking of clearing things up, let's talk about the plot holes, because Transformers Fall of Cybertron has a few of them. And I'm not going to nitpick every single little thing of this game, because A, the game is like 8 to 12 hours long, and B, there's really only one major plot hole. There's a point towards the start of the game where Megatron ends up getting killed. This leads to Starscream taking over and getting his own level, yada yada yada. But sometime after that, there's a level where you play as Soundwave briefly, and for that brief time, you're rebuilding Megatron. Most people would just think of it as adding a main character back to the story, but anyone who's either a longtime fan of Generation 1, since this game is loosely based off what would happen before it, or anyone who has any knowledge of Megatron from Generation 1 will wonder, if Megatron was reincarnated, wouldn't that make him Galvatron? After all, this is an alternate universe to the actual Generation 1 cartoon, so Galvatron could exist as far as we know before Optimus' death. But then why does nobody refer to him as Galvatron? Hate to bug you again, Rodimus, but would said reincarnation of Megatron be Megatron or Galvatron?
Okay, hold on a second here. First of all, the only time that, if you're going to be talking about G1 Megatron becoming Galvatron, is when he is rebuilt by Unicron. Obviously, I know if you guys are fans of the Unicron trilogy, they actually had Megatron get rebuilt into Galvatron, like, each series by all of a sudden getting a massive surge of energy. But in reality, no, he's supposed to be rebuilt by Unicron and then to become Galvatron. The way it happens in this game is that it actually is more so that he got blasted to pieces by Metroplex's fist, and Soundwave simply rebuilt him with a more powerful version of his body. So it's the same Megatron, but the only difference is he's got a few more capabilities that he didn't have before. That's the reason why he's not Galvatron.
Again, thank you for helping out. But in general, that's the only immersion-breaking plot hole I noticed. Maybe there's more, but the rest, if any, didn't seem to affect my experience. Next we move on to the continuity errors, and what the hell? Why is everything related to this game story-wise so convoluted and broken? Rodimus, just talk. So before I let Rodimus talk, let me give a quick backstory of what I'm talking about. This game is meant to fit into the aligned continuity of the Transformers universe. That's why I never said it's a direct prequel to Generation 1, and only said loosely based around it. But since I can't explain what an abomination of a continuity this game is part of, Rodimus, can you help me one more time?
Okay, let me actually explain this to you. Transformers Fall and War and Fall of Cybertron are actually the video game versions of the story Exodus, which is part of the aligned continuity. And the aligned continuity is kind of messy. The way it's supposed to work is that you play the Fall of and War of Cybertron games, and that kind of gives you the pre-Earth history of the aligned continuity for the classic characters that we know and love. And then Transformers Prime is the sequel series to that. And then, of course, Rescue Bots and Robots in Disguise. That's all part of the aligned continuity. This game does have a lot of G1 references and a lot of G1 callbacks, but it's very, very, very clear that this game is not part of the G1 Transformers continuity. It's part of the aligned continuity, which again is very different than G1 in a lot of ways. But that's a whole nother discussion for another day.
Although it may seem that this game has more wrong with it than right, which maybe it does, it's still one of my favorite games of all time. The story's good, if not great, the double plot with the Autobots and Decepticons works, the Easter eggs are good, the voice work is good, the gameplay is alright, serviceable at best. but I'd still recommend this game to anyone. It's a fun game. The plot keeps you engaged, and overall you could binge play this game all the way through without it getting boring, probably. But yeah, this is a game I would go out and buy if I could. But you can't. As of today, May 20th, 2018, there's no legal way of buying a copy of Transformers Fall of Cybertron for the PC. There's 2 people on eBay that were selling box copies, and that's it. I remember late last year that Activision had the game on sale for about $20 instead of $59, and by the time I had the money to go buy it, the game was removed from Steam. The theory is that Activision never renewed the license, and therefore the game had to be taken down. That's why I didn't review the multiplayer in this video, because I had to get a pirated copy of the game, which detected it was pirated, and wouldn't allow the game to go online because of that. I couldn't buy a copy of the game to test the multiplayer, and I couldn't buy a copy of the game at all. But if you ever see the game for sale secondhand at a yard sale or a library or something, buy it. It's worth it.